This video made the world shudder with horror. It shows Russian soldiers filming their execution of an unarmed Ukrainian prisoner of war. He appears to understand what will happen to him, but he fiercely pronounces the slogan, "Glory to Ukraine." He is being shot from several guns. The murderers film their own crime and later upload the evidence to social media. Some might say it's an isolated incident. But if you manage not to close your eyes, you will see the horrible and uncomfortable truth the world is so reluctant to see. Mass killings of Ukrainians is Russia's military strategy, a managed process that involves those who pull the triggers and those who give the orders. This film shows just a few of Russia's war crimes. But even so, it helps one comprehend the scale of the absolute evil Ukraine is confronted with. This shocking video was made on the 7th of March 2022 by a Ukrainian military surveillance drone. It monitored Russian military positions between the Ukrainian villages of Mila and rUZZIA on the Kyiv-Zhytomyr highway. The authenticity of the footage you're about to see has been ascertained by experts. On the side of the road stands a Russian tank. It is marked with a tactical V sign, which at the beginning of the large-scale invasion distinguished the Russian military vehicles advancing towards Kyiv. In the light-colored car moving along the highway, there are 4 people: a young couple, their 6-year-old son, and a relative. As the vehicle approaches the tank, a Russian soldier opens fire at it from the tank machine gun. The car stops. The driver gets out of it with his hands up. He appears to implore the Russian soldiers, but they shoot him in the head at point-blank range. A woman and the child are being taken out of the car and led to an unknown location. The body of the killed man is being dragged by the arms to the side of the road. We don't see the other woman. She, or her body rather, stays in the car. She was killed with the first shots by the Russian machine gunner. The woman's body would later be burned down by the Russians right on the highway, together with the car. This is what it looked like when it was found by the Ukrainian military and media after the liberation of the occupied part of the Kyiv region, almost a month after the killing. The woman's name has been identified: Ksenia Tsaturova, mother of the 6-year-old boy taken by the invaders. She had covered the son with her own body and saved his life. The shot-dead driver was her husband, Maxim Iovanko. The name of the couple's relative who was in the car with them is Natalia. Apparently, the Russians wanted to kill her and the 6-year-old boy, Hordy, too, but then let them go. In early April, the remains of Ksenia's body were found in the burned-down car. Further down the highway, on a strip of about 200 meters long, there were several more bullet-riddled and burned-down cars and at least 13 dead bodies. Several female bodies with signs of rape were piled up and set on fire right on the highway. Ukrainian investigators have not yet identified all those involved in those war crimes. But the names of those who killed the parents of the 6-year-old rUZZIA are already known. Ukraine's Office of Prosecutor General issued a note of suspicion to Corporal Chingiz Tereshinov and Senior Lieutenant Daniil Ishchenko. The two are servicemen of Russia's 5th Detached Tank Brigade, and it was from their tank that the car of the victims was shot at.
Вже майже під'їжджають до Бородянки. Ці розстріляні машини просто мені дають покою. Скільки людей, їхавши в авто, просто стріляли.
There are all grounds to believe that it's not by accident that Russian soldiers fired on civilian vehicles. They did it by orders of their commanders, and they did it deliberately, not only at the beginning, but throughout the war in Ukraine. September 25, 2022, a road near the village of Kurilivka, the Kharkiv region. 6 civilian automobiles were leaving the area of hostilities. All in all, there were 48 people in them, including women, children, and the elderly. At about 9 a.m., the convoy came under fire from heavy machine guns.
Отаку хуйню окупанти з нашими людьми чудять.
This video was shot just a few hours later. 26 people were shot dead, including 13 children, 14 to be more accurate, as one of the women killed was pregnant. The French experts who examined the cars and dead bodies concluded that the rounds, the fragments of which were found on the scene, had been fired from the cannon of a combat reconnaissance vehicle, rUZZIA, which is used only by Russia's military. Five-year-old Polina Dyachenko is one of the survivors of the convoy massacre. Her parents were killed by Russian bullets in front of her eyes. Polina's grandmother says the previously joyful and talkative girl has simply stopped speaking. The most frequent cases of civilian car convoys destroyed by Russians occurred near Kyiv at the very beginning of the large-scale invasion. The enemies deliberately prevented humanitarian convoys from leaving the occupied areas. They stopped the vehicles with barrages of machine gun and cannon fire. In each of these cars, near the town of Bucha, were people desperately trying to flee the war. Thus, through terror, the Russian invaders turned the Kyiv suburbs into a ghetto. Bucha. The name of this little town near Kyiv has become a synonym of genocide and mass killing. From late February to early April, the town was under Russian occupation. This footage was shot by Ukrainian military and police who came to Bucha on the first day after the liberation. They were prepared for anything, but not for what they saw there in the very first minutes. Each of the towns occupied by Russians had some especially dangerous areas, but Bucha was mortally dangerous everywhere.
Парню 26 лет, никого не трогал, гулял с собачкой. Ага. И все, вот это все. Вы знаете, что случилось? Убили, просто убили, да.
Оце є той хлопець, про якого говорили, що вийшов погуляти з собакою.
This is Yablunska Street. People now call it the Street of Death. The road leading downtown is literally strewn with dead bodies. There are more than 20 of them on this street alone, both men and women. None of them was in a military uniform. They were all civilians, all found with gunshot wounds. These 4 men were killed on March 18, 2022, with their hands tied. Their names are known: Dmitro Shkurenkov, Maxim Kireyev, Alexander Chumak, and Alexander Hutorovich. None of them had anything to do with Ukraine's military. Just like these men killed in the basement of the children's sanatorium Promenisty. The building housed Russian military, who had turned the basement into torture chambers. On the very first day after the liberation, dead bodies of 5 civilians with their hands tied behind their backs were found in this execution basement. They had been tortured, then forced to their knees and shot in the head, execution style. The sanatorium accommodated a unit of Russia's 64th Motorized Rifle Brigade. The place of its permanent deployment is Khabarovsky Krai in the Russian Far East. The commander of the brigade, Azadbek Umurbekov, received the nickname the Butcher of Bucha. At least 10 of his subordinates who killed Ukrainians were identified during the investigation. Also, the investigators believe that officers of the brigade gave direct orders to their subordinates to kill civilians. In this photo, company commander Vasyl Litvinenko looks like a model family man. This wonderful husband and father ordered to kill a retired pensioner and destroy his house by tank fire. In Bucha alone, at least 461 locals were killed. Overall, in the Kyiv region, within 1 month of occupation, the Russians killed 1,339 civilians. Very often, Russian soldiers did not allow the locals to bury their loved ones, and the dead bodies lay out in the open throughout the time of occupation. The Russian military did not kill Ukrainians just for the fun of it. They did it in a systemic manner. Their main goal was to terrorize the defiant, to deter even the slightest signs of resistance. In the occupied territories, within a short period of time, a whole system was put in place for torturing those who did not accept the occupation. The 10th of September 2022 was a day of utter joy and happiness for Ukraine's military and the residents of Izium in the south of the Kharkiv region.
Звільняємо Ізюм від окупантів.
On that day, this strategically important town was liberated after 5 months of occupation.
Слава Україні!
But the elation soon changed to pain when it became obvious how many innocent lives the invasion had claimed. Before the war, this woodland was a favorite recreation area for the locals, a perfect place for romantic rendezvous or outings with kids, but not anymore. After the town was deoccupied, a mass burial site was found here. It contained 447 bodies of men, women, and children. Most of them died a violent death. At least half of those bodies had obvious signs of torture on them. Gunshot wounds made at close range, broken limbs, tied hands. The same style as in Bucha.
Ця будівля праворуч. Це штаб ФСБ. Бувший. А тепер ми йдемо до наступної катівні.
In Izium, which had about 50,000 inhabitants, there were at least 4 torture sites. This is one of them. Over the years of Russian aggression, for many Ukrainians, the expression to be sent to the basement has come to mean captivity and torture. This is one of such places, which the Russians used to brutalize the locals.
Все, що вони там засовували, отакі вентиляційні отвори, це робили вони для того, щоб переробити це цивільне приміщення, повністю цивільне. Архів якийсь тут є, Укрпромпроекта. Вони його пристосували, зробили номера камер.
Dmytro Lubinets, the Ukrainian human rights ombudsman, came to the town right after the liberation.
Ось все, що тут є, отак вони і утримувалися. Вони спали на таких ковдрах. Ось, і все.
The ombudsman gathers evidence of torture that those illegally incarcerated here were subjected to.
Це один з стільців, тобто, за показами потерпілих, їх прив'язували до стільців. Це один з них. Тут велика кількість ми знаходимо. Он стяжки. Вони прив'язували стяжками. Били трубами. Як говорять потерпілі, вони взагалі не бачили своїх катів. Вони спілкувалися тільки, якщо особи були або з пакетом на голові, або з якимось мішком.
Some of the pieces of evidence you see now are made public by Dmytro Lubinets for the first time.
Росіянин, ми тебе вже знаємо.
This young man was kept in the basement for 3 months, and it was only after the liberation that he was able to breathe the air of freedom again.
Вы находились там больше 90 дней. Какие использовали методы давления? Били, ток?
Да, током, тапик вот этот их.
Тапик — это прибор, который так крутится, да?
Да, крутит, говорит, типа номер набираем, типа и крутим, типа.
Мы в подвале нашли его.
На два пальца вот так вот скотчем привязываем. То есть крутили тапиком. А так дубинкой, битой, херячими, короче, на вся голова. Шрамы.
While in captivity, the victims were under video surveillance around the clock.
Було підведено відеоспостереження.
Стояли камери, і звук. Бо потерпіли пояснювали, якщо вони починали розмовляти голосно і було чутно звук, їх заходили, били. Тому вони наклонялися отут і тихенько розмовляли друг з другом.
За показами утримувались діти до 20 років. Їм дали якісь бумажки, коробки, бо холодно, щоб вони тут.
Це їх молитва.
We don't know who scratched these prayers on the plaster. We don't even know if the people whose words silently scream from the walls of this torture chamber managed to survive. Because the only right the invaders granted them was the right to pray. Sometimes it seems like prayer is the only hope for survival when people are being killed on a literally industrial scale, with satanic ingenuity in the use of mortal tools. This is the Kyiv region again. Most civilian victims here were killed with firearms, but sometimes dead bodies were found with such dart-shaped objects in them.
В кожному снаряді тисячі отаких маленьких гвіздочків, і це заборонена зброя.
They're called flechettes. They are dispersed by shells and used against enemy personnel. It's a barbaric weapon because it's indiscriminate and kills all in its path. That's why the use of such rounds in civilian areas is prohibited under humanitarian law. But for Russia's military in Ukraine, both legal and humanitarian norms are non-existent notions. Flechette rounds were found on Russian artillery positions near Bucha. That made it possible for the investigators to establish direct involvement of Russian artillery servicemen in deliberate killing of civilians. In fact, Russian invaders kill civilians with the use of all mortal instruments available in their arsenal. This is the village of Markhalivka, the Kyiv region. Before the war, there were several hundred residents here, and not a single military facility. In the evening of the 4th of March 2022, the Russians launched a missile attack on the village. Judging by the size of the crater, they used a strategic bomber. This is what the journalists saw on the scene of this war crime the following morning. 2 houses were totally destroyed. And these are the first minutes after the airstrike.
Погибших не знаем. Скорая помощь, все сюда.
The locals who dashed to the rescue don't know yet that their neighbors are already dead. 5 adults and a teenage girl. The girl's name was Masha. She was only 12 years old. Her father survived.
Меня откопали вот там, вот, где собака, вот где-то меня там откопали. А внучков нашли вот там чуть дальше где-то. Дочку раздавила, пополам переломала. Машеньку мертвую достали, зять. Вот тут один погиб, зарела жена. Не знаю, как можно было выжить, если все дома кругом развалины, а я выжил, и 2 маленьких мальчика выжило.
One might say it was an accident, that someone must have launched a missile by mistake. But the truth is there were 2 missiles, which gives grounds to believe that this particular geolocation was used for targeting. Russia says nothing as to who is responsible for that and other similar strikes. Meanwhile, journalists of several media outlets discovered a secretive group of dozens of military engineers who programmed the flight paths of missiles at the main computation center of the armed forces of Russia. They work from 2 locations, at the Ministry of Defense in Moscow and at the Admiralty headquarters in St. Petersburg. The group consists of about 30 nice-looking Russian young men and women with an educational and professional background in programming. Some of them even used to work as computer game designers. The analysis of their personal data indicates that those individuals are directly involved in mass killings of civilians in Ukraine. Those people don't see the faces of their victims, just like the crews of strategic bombers or the rocket ship commanders who pressed the launch button and fired the rockets that follow their pre-programmed flight paths. And at the rockets' destination points, there is pain, tragedy, and death of innocent victims. Late November, in the little town of Vilnyansk, a Russian missile hit the local hospital maternity ward, killing a newborn child. The boy's life lasted for only 2 days. The youngest child killed in an airstrike in the city of Dnipro was 11 months old. On that day, January 14th, 2023, a Russian X-22 cruise missile hit a high-rise residential house and totally destroyed 2 sections of the building. The names of 46 victims of the strike are already known. 11 were not identified. Another 11 are reported missing. The missile was launched from a Tu-22M3 strategic bomber belonging to Russia's 52nd Aviation Regiment. Regiment Commander Oleg Timoshin. The aircraft call sign 42492. Half a year earlier, the very same regiment launched a strike on a shopping mall in the city of Kremenchuk, killing 21 people. Security cameras captured the moment when a missile hit the building crowded with hundreds of shoppers. And again, it was an X-22 cruise missile, designed for striking aircraft carriers and not shopping centers. Ukrainian civilians keep being terrorized by missiles launched from aircraft, ground systems, and even submarines. It was a missile launched from a Russian submarine in the Black Sea that killed 26 people in the downtown area of the city of Vinnytsia on July 14, 2022. 3 among the victims of the Russian Kalibr missile were children. 8-year-old Kirill Pyakhin burned down inside a car where he was waiting for his parents. 7-year-old Maxim Zhary was at a hospital with his mother. They were killed together.
Это центр Винницы. Мать вашу. Это ребенок был.
4-year-old Liza Dmitrieva was walking along the street with her mom, Irina, when a missile struck close by.
Куди ми йдемо, зайка? Куди ми йдемо? До Алли?
This sunny girl with Down syndrome was the apple of her mother's eye. Irina had even created a video blog showing how her daughter was growing up. Little Lisa was happy when she was being filmed for a New Year video clip, together with Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska. Lisa's mother promised to her, "You will be the happiest girl in the world." But it was not meant to be. Investigators believe the missile was launched from the submarine Al-Rosa, which at that time was commanded by Denis Sopin. The order to launch a strike was given by the division commander Anatoly Varochkin. It's hard to imagine that the 2 officers experience any pangs of conscience over the killing of Lisa and other innocent civilians in Ukraine. But at Lisa's funeral, amid the agony of grief, the faith in the ultimate triumph of good over evil reigned supreme. Absolute evil shall be defeated, said the priest who administered the last rites. But that requires that the world does not make any compromise with absolute evil, and does not sell out one war-ravaged European country for its own comfort. Every crime has its name and surname. That's why punishment must be targeted and unavoidable. Otherwise, evil will inevitably return. It will come back to us, manifold.